So here we are again, and we are at our web page here, and I have a text box here. I called it first. A text box here, I called it second, and then a button to execute our JavaScript. All right. So, oh yeah, and hey, by the way, you guys, I'm going to put down below, down this way in the comments section, some links so that you guys can just copy and paste in this code to make it really easy. So you can, if you want, you can just get the code really easily. Okay, for everything, for all of this, both also the CSS file. Okay, so you'll notice that maybe I hope you've watched my other videos, so you'll know what I'm doing in terms of the styling and the presentation and the way the HTML elements look. I define that here, right, in my CSS. Okay, so in my previous videos I talk about this, and you can learn about that there. Okay, so here we have our ID of first, our ID of second, and we want to get the data inside them, and we want to bring, essentially this is going to be our first name and last name, and we want to grab these two elements, put them together, and then display them right here. Okay, it seems like it's very simple, but you'll see that it ends up looking a little bit complicated. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through this example, and then we're going to quickly jump to using just a little bit of jQuery. Okay, and so what we're going to do in the next video is we are going to jump really quickly into getting the very basics, a few simple things in jQuery that will make it easier for us to, and more practical, more realistic for us to, as we go through the different JavaScript concepts. Okay, all right, so here we have the document object, and this is pure, just basic JavaScript, right? We don't have to we don't have to bring in extra files. We don't have to, the way we do with this font awesome. You remember from the previous video, you might remember we had to bring in some additional files to get the functionality. No, all this is built into your browser, right? Okay, so here we have a variable myButton, okay, and that is this. And so what we did is we created an object out of it, and we used this document, okay, and that document is the web page, our whole web page here. Okay, that's what that stands for. All right, and then we used a method, a function that is part of, that is found within the document object, and that's getElementByID. And then we pass that function, that method. Okay, when a function is attached to an object, we'll call it a method, although it's really just the same thing, right? Okay, if we write our own function, okay, we'll call it a function, right? All right, something like this. All right, but if it's an object, we will call this a method. All right, and there are built-in functions, okay, in JavaScript, the same way there were in PHP. If you remember from my previous video, there are some functions, they're just built in. You don't have to do anything, okay? All right, so here, get element by ID, and here's our element, button. I called it button. You can see the ID tag there. We assign it to a variable, my button, and now here, my button on click, we will then execute a function, all right? And everything between here and here, all of this, when it is clicked, is going to occur, is going to happen. It will execute, okay? So the first thing I do is it's convenient. The first thing I do is I get element first. Okay, so I get another element. Okay, here's another element. Right, this text input element. I called it first. All right, and then first dot value, that represents what is in here. Okay, so if I put this ASDF, that's the value that's going to be passed in right here into, I called it my first string, right? Okay, so it returned that. We put it in first string, and then we did the same thing with second. Okay, and second was the second text box for the last name, right? Then what I did was, and well, let's just quickly take a look at it here. And we click, and John and Smith, they're put together and they're displayed down here. So what I did here, I created a variable, and we create a variable, it's very simple. We just take var and we put in front of it, put it in front of our variable name, okay? Now, I took first string, which is this. I remember I've gotten my value from the first text box. And then in JavaScript, do you remember in PHP, in my previous videos, in PHP, we would have done it like this. First string, concatenation, right? In PHP, the dot operator can well, we use the word concatenates, to concatenate, right? The dot operator concatenates two strings. Okay, now you may think, oh, why use that strange word? That's a weird word. It's not a common word. But in programming, it is a common word. So you need to know it. Okay? So remember in PHP, we would have done this. First string, a space, and then we'll concatenate it to the second string. Okay, that's how we would have done it in PHP. But in JavaScript, we can add numbers together. Okay, we can add 4 plus 19. Okay, when we're doing math, all right, with the plus sign. Okay. But we can, in JavaScript, we can also concatenate, bring strings together with a plus sign, right? So I put that in full name, and then I went and I got this result box. I grabbed that element. Here's this element result box. I grabbed it with my JavaScript. I put it in a variable, and then I took result box inner text equals full name. Okay, and that's what did it. All right, now you know what, if you think that was just a little bit too strange or too difficult or too long for something simple, I would say, hey, You are right. Okay, and there is an easier way to do it. When we grab these elements, okay, on our page and we interact with them, we want to use jQuery. Okay, jQuery is far, far better than that. And there's another reason. Many browsers still interpret JavaScript differently, whereas jQuery will harmonize our actions. Okay, essentially it will resolve all these browser differences so that I don't have to write different JavaScript for different browsers. Okay, and there's a lot of different situations and circumstances that can occur in your JavaScript coding where you will have to do that. Okay, you still will have to do that. And that is no good. So we'll just use jQuery, okay? But our fundamental logic, like loops and switches and if-else clauses or blocks, we're still, of course, using JavaScript, because jQuery itself is just built out of JavaScript, right? JavaScript is the wood. And jQuery is just something that is totally popular. Everyone, I mean, really, it's totally awesome. And even if you're building stuff in Node.js, you'll still use jQuery. Here and there, or a lot, you'll still use it, unless you go for like Angular.js or some of these other frameworks where you can get out of that. But and even if you use Angular in certain situations, you still use it. Okay, so next video, let's go on to getting some jQuery in there to help us. And as we go along, we'll learn more about different operators. We'll learn more about a few different built-in JavaScript functions. So we'll do it as we go, because on this channel, I want you guys to learn the areas of JavaScript and jQuery that you must know, that only the stuff you really need to do a good job, because otherwise you'll waste too much time. You really will waste too much time otherwise.